The rain had been falling since morning, a steady rhythm against the windows that made the house feel smaller, lonelier. The lights flickered once, twice, and I whispered to myself, "Not again." But before I could reach the candles, the power went out completely, leaving the living room soaked in shadows. I sat there for a moment, listening to the storm, the clock ticking softly, and the sound of his breathing from the couch. Daniel, my husband, my love, my stranger. He was sitting there, staring at the blank television screen, his eyes distant, lost in a world that no longer remembered me. Sometimes he'd glance at me like I was a nurse or a kind neighbor, offering polite confusion in his tired smile. And other times, when I caught him in a fleeting moment, I could swear he knew me, even if just for a heartbeat. The doctors called it retrograde amnesia. I called it a slow goodbye that never ended. It had been almost 2 years since the accident. One car crash, one head injury, one night that rewrote our lives completely. The man who used to leave little notes on the fridge saying, "I love you more than morning coffee," now didn't even remember the sound of my name. "Daniel," I said softly, moving closer to him, holding the candle in my hand. The glow danced across his face, familiar and foreign at the same time. He looked up, his expression uncertain. "You shouldn't walk around with candles. It's dangerous," he said, his voice calm, polite, the kind of tone you use with strangers. I smiled sadly. "You used to say that every time the power went out." "Did I?" he asked, tilting his head like a curious child. "Yes," I whispered, setting the candle on the table. "You said it during the first storm after we moved here. You made us hot chocolate and told me stories about your childhood summers." He smiled faintly. "Sounds like something I'd say." My throat tightened. It was. The silence between us was heavy, filled with everything I couldn't say. I missed his laugh, his teasing, the way he used to hum under his breath while making breakfast. I missed us. Every night I told myself it was okay, that he was alive, and that should be enough. But the truth? It wasn't. I walked toward the old cabinet near the corner, the one he built with his own hands years ago. The wood had scratches from our first move-in day. He used to joke that every scratch was a memory stamp. I ran my fingers across it, tracing the old marks, trying to remember the warmth in his laughter. Behind me, Daniel spoke again. Do I know you from before the accident?" The question hit me like a blade. He'd asked it before, but it never stopped hurting. I turned around slowly. "Yes," I said. "We've known each other for a long time." He nodded, thoughtful. "You seem kind. That's what broke me. You seem kind. Not you are my wife. Not I love you. Just a kind stranger." I forced a smile. "You were kind too. Once upon a time," he frowned slightly. "Once upon a time. Like a story." "Yes," I said softly. "Like a story." Outside, thunder rolled and the candle flickered. I reached for a blanket and gently placed it over his shoulders. He didn't resist. He never did. But he didn't thank me either. His world was empty, a silent place where love was just a shadow of a memory. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. I wrote letters he would never read. Every page began the same way. "Dear Daniel, today you looked at me a little longer than yesterday. Some nights that was enough. The next morning, the power was still out. The house was cold, and Daniel was awake before me, sitting by the window. The light of dawn touched his face, and for a second, I saw the man I once knew. Quiet, thoughtful, lost in dreams. "Do you want breakfast?" I asked gently. He nodded, still looking outside. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "What is?" "The rain," I smiled. "He used to say that all the time. You always loved the rain." He looked at me again, his brows furrowed. "Did I?" "Yes," I whispered. "You said it reminded you of beginnings. You kissed me in the rain once. You said it washed away everything bad." He chuckled softly. Not the laugh I knew, but close enough. "That sounds nice." "It was," I said. "It really was." I brought him tea. He took it carefully, his fingers brushing mine. For a second he froze, looking at my hand. My heart skipped. Sometimes touch brought back fragments, flashes of the man I loved. "Your hands," he said slowly. "They feel familiar." My eyes burned. "They should," he smiled faintly. "I wish I could remember." "So do I said under my breath. He didn't hear me. That afternoon, I went into the attic, a place I hadn't dared to open since the accident. The dust hung thick in the air, and the boxes were stacked high with memories I couldn't face. I opened one marked Us. Inside were photo albums, our wedding invitations, and the anniversary letter he wrote me 5 years ago. I traced his handwriting with trembling fingers. "To my forever storm," it said, "because even when the lights go out, I'll find my way to you." I sank to the floor, clutching the letter against my chest. The words blurred through tears. The house creaked softly under the weight of silence. Behind me, footsteps. I turned, and Daniel was standing there, confused, watching me. "What is this place?" he asked. "Our attic," I said softly. "Our memories." He looked at the photos spread around me, wedding pictures, vacations, birthdays. He picked up one where we were laughing, soaked in rain, holding each other under a broken umbrella. "Who are they?" he asked. "That's us," I whispered. He looked at the picture again, then at me. "We look happy." "We were." He frowned slightly. "And now?" I swallowed hard. "Now. I'm just waiting for you to come home again." That night the power returned. The lights blinked back to life, washing the house in soft yellow. Daniel stood in the hallway, staring at the glow as if seeing it for the first time. "It's strange," he said quietly. "When the lights went out last night, I felt something, like I was missing someone." I looked at him, my heart trembling. "Maybe you were." He turned toward me, his eyes uncertain. "Was it you?" I wanted to say yes, it was me, it's always been me. But instead, I whispered, "Maybe." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe I'll remember next time the lights go out." And for the first time in 2 years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, he would. The morning after the lights came back, something felt different. The air in the house was heavy, but not with sadness, more like the quiet pause before something changes. Daniel was sitting by the kitchen window again, sunlight brushing his face. He looked peaceful, lost in thoughts that were finally starting to have shape. "Good morning," I said softly, setting 2 cups of tea on the table. He looked up and smiled. Not the empty, polite one I was used to, but a small, genuine curve that reached his eyes. "Morning," he said quietly. It was such a simple word, but for me it felt like a miracle. He took the cup and looked out again. "I dreamt something last night," he said slowly, as if each word was a fragile secret. My heart skipped. "You did?" He nodded. "There was a storm. We were outside. I was holding someone. You, maybe? I don't know. It felt warm." I tried not to cry. "Yes," I whispered. "That was real." He frowned slightly, trying to pull the image closer in his mind. It felt like home. That word, home, almost broke me. For 2 years, I'd been living with a man who had forgotten our love, our home, our memories. And now, for the first time, he'd used the word like it still meant something. I sat down opposite him, my hands trembling slightly. "Daniel," I said carefully, "do you want to see more of those memories?" He looked uncertain. "What do you mean?" "I mean, pictures, letters, maybe videos, things that might help you remember." He hesitated. "I'm not sure. The doctors said not to force it." "I won't force anything," I said quickly. "Just maybe you'll feel something." He nodded slowly. "Okay." We spent that afternoon in the living room. I brought down a box of photo albums and set them between us. He picked one up, his fingers brushing over the cover, the leather worn soft from years of use. "This one?" he asked. "That's our first year together," I said, smiling. "You used to call it our rookie season of love." He laughed softly. "That sounds ridiculous." "You were ridiculous," I teased, and for a second it felt like before. He opened the album. The first photo was of us painting the living room wall, both of us covered in blue splatters. His eyes softened. "We look happy." "We were," I said. He flipped another page. There was a picture of our first trip to the lake, where he pushed me into the water, and I dragged him in with me. He stared at it longer than usual, his eyes distant. "I can almost feel this," he whispered. "Feel what?" "The water, the cold. The sound of you laughing." I froze. "You remember that?" He shook his head, confused. "No, not remember, just feel." I smiled through tears. "That's enough." That evening the storm returned. Rain hammered against the roof, thunder echoing across the hills. The power flickered again, and then, like some cruel trick of fate, the lights went out, just like that night 2 years ago. Daniel stood in the dark hallway, his voice uncertain. "Is it supposed to do that?" "Yes," I said softly, lighting a candle. "It's just the storm." The flame glowed between us, painting his face in golden shadow. He stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "This feels familiar." My breath caught. "It should," I said. "You always said candles made the world softer." He smiled faintly. "I said that?" "Yes." He took a small step closer. "I believe you." The silence between us stretched, fragile, trembling, but filled with something alive. "Sometimes," he said finally, "I see flashes. A face, a voice, laughter. It's all tangled. It's okay," I whispered. "Let them come." "Don't fight it," he nodded. "It's strange. Every time the lights go out, I feel closer to something, like my mind gets quiet. And there's just this..." He touched his chest lightly. "Feeling. Maybe it's your heart remembering," I said softly. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. "Do hearts remember?" "Yes," I said, voice trembling, "even when the mind forgets." The next day, Daniel wanted to go outside. It had been months since he'd asked to leave the house willingly. The rain had stopped, the air still damp and smelling of wet earth. We walked down the little path behind our home, the same one where we used to take morning walks, hand in hand. This time, there was distance between us, but for me, just walking beside him again felt like a gift. He looked around, touching the flowers, the old fence, the mailbox. "Did I plant these?" he asked, pointing to the tulips. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Every spring. You said they were your promise flowers." promise?" he asked. "You said they meant you'd always come back to me." He smiled faintly. "Did I keep that promise?" My chest tightened. "You're here, aren't you?" He nodded slowly, thoughtful. "I suppose I am." Later, as we sat on the porch, the sun dipped behind the clouds, and Daniel turned to me. "You said we were married?" "Yes," I said softly. "How long?" 10 years before the accident. He whistled low. "That's a long time." "Yes." He paused, then looked down. "Was I a good husband?" Tears burned in my eyes. "The best," he smiled almost shyly. "Then I hope I can be again." My throat closed. "You already are." He reached out suddenly, touching my hand. It was a small gesture, uncertain and gentle, but it was more than I'd had in years. "Your hands," he said again, the same line as before. "They feel like something I've been missing." I couldn't speak. The world blurred around me, all sound drowned in the sound of my heartbeat. That night, he couldn't sleep. I found him in the living room, staring at the window again. The moonlight spilled across his face. "I saw it again," he said quietly when I walked in. "What?" "The storm. The same one from my dream. But this time there was more. You were crying, and I said something to you, but I can't remember what." I sat down beside him. "Maybe next time you will." He turned to me, eyes glistening. "It's strange. I feel guilty for something I can't remember, like I hurt you somehow." I swallowed hard. "You didn't. It wasn't your fault." He shook his head. "It feels like it was." I reached for his hand. "All that matters is you're here." He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second his gaze softened, familiar, full of the man I once knew. "Anna," he whispered. My heart stopped. He hadn't said my name since the accident. Tears filled my eyes. "What did you say?" He blinked, confused. I don't know. Did I say something?" "Yes," I whispered, shaking. "You said my name." He frowned. "I did?" "Yes," he smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'm starting to remember the important parts." That night, when the lights flickered again and darkness filled the room, I didn't reach for the candle. I just sat there beside him, in the quiet, holding his hand. Because for the first time in 2 years, he remembered something real, and that was enough to light the whole world. The days that followed felt like holding my breath underwater, heavy, slow, uncertain. Every time Daniel looked at me, I waited to see if he'd say my name again. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But the way he said Anna that night, it still echoed in my chest like a fragile melody I didn't want to lose. He was changing. I could feel it in the small ways. How his eyes followed me around the room. How he asked little questions about our home, our life. Once he even called the bedroom ours again. Tiny words, tiny miracles. That morning, he was sitting at the dining table, staring at a cup of coffee he had made himself. He never used to like coffee before, always tea. But something about the smell seemed to pull him somewhere far away. "I think I used to drink this," he said, breaking the silence. "You didn't," I smiled. "You said coffee made you too serious." He laughed quietly. "Maybe that's why I like tea better. I didn't like being serious." The laughter faded, replaced by something quieter. "I had a dream again," he said, my heart tensed. "What was it about?" He looked down. There was shouting, the rain. "I think I was driving. You were in the car. Then everything went white." My breath caught. "Daniel," he rubbed his forehead, frustrated. "It's all broken pieces, but I think it was my fault. I reached across the table. It wasn't. You've said that before, but it wasn't your fault. It was an accident. He shook his head, eyes distant. I don't know. I just remember you crying. I said something awful, something I shouldn't have. Tears burned in my eyes. We fought. Everyone fights. It doesn't matter now. It matters if it hurt you, he said softly. I froze. The man sitting before me, gentle, regretful, felt more like the Daniel I lost. You didn't mean it, I whispered. He smiled sadly. Maybe I did back then, but if I could take it back? You just did, I said, my voice trembling. That afternoon the rain started again. Heavy, endless rain, the kind that muffled the world. I lit candles around the living room, like always. Daniel watched me move from one corner to another, his eyes following the soft flicker of light. Why do you always light candles? He asked quietly. I smiled faintly. Because when the lights went out the first time, you said candles make the world gentler. You told me stories in the dark. Stories. Yes, I said. About us. How we met. How we fought. How we always found our way back. He smiled faintly. Did I always keep my promises? I hesitated. Most of them. He tilted his head. Which one didn't I? I swallowed hard. You promised you'd never forget me. Silence filled the room. His eyes glistened in the candlelight, heavy with guilt. I didn't want to, he said finally. I know, I whispered. That evening, we sat together on the couch. The storm outside deepened, wind howling against the glass. Daniel seemed restless, his fingers tapping on the armrest. Can I ask you something? He said suddenly. Of course. What were we like before? I thought for a moment. We were loud, I said with a small smile. We laughed too much, fought too much, loved too much. You always said we burned like fire. Beautiful, dangerous, but worth every scar. He chuckled softly. Sounds intense. It was. He looked at me then. A long, searching look. You make it sound like we were something rare. We were, I said. We still are, he nodded slowly, thoughtful. You make it sound like I'm worth remembering. You are. He smiled faintly. Then maybe I'll find my way back. The next day, Daniel wanted to visit the lake, the one from our old photographs. It was the first time he had suggested leaving the house for somewhere meaningful. My hands shook as I packed a blanket and 2 sandwiches. It felt like we were going on a date after years apart. The road was quiet, lined with trees dripping from the last storm. He drove this time, slowly, carefully. I sat beside him, watching his hands on the wheel. They looked steady, sure, like they used to. When we reached the lake, everything was the same. The rippling water, the soft wind, the silence that always felt like peace. He stood by the edge, staring at the reflection of the clouds. I've been here before, he said quietly. Yes, I whispered. You proposed to me here. He looked down at the water, his eyes unfocused. I remember something, not clear, just a feeling. You were laughing. You said something about ducks. I smiled through tears. You said I ruined your perfect moment by laughing too much. He turned toward me, and for a heartbeat, the look in his eyes was the same as it had been that day. Bright, full of love. I think I loved that laugh, he said. You did, I whispered. You still do. We sat on the blanket, eating quietly, watching the ripples dance on the surface. After a while, he said, You know what's strange? Every time the lights go out or the rain starts, I feel close to you, like something wakes up inside me. I smiled softly. Maybe love hides in the dark. Maybe it's waiting for you to find it again. He nodded. Then I'll keep looking. That night, he woke up from a nightmare. I heard him whispering my name in the dark, his voice trembling. I rushed to his side. "Daniel," I said, holding his hand. "It's okay, I'm here." He was shaking, eyes wide. "It was the crash," he said, voice breaking. "We were fighting." I was angry. "You said you didn't want to talk while I was driving." I looked away for 1 second. I squeezed his hand. "It's okay, stop." He shook his head, tears falling. "It's all my fault." "No," I said firmly. "It was the rain. The brakes failed. It wasn't you." "But I yelled," he whispered. "You cried. I remember your face before everything went black." I held him tighter, and when you woke up, I was still there. He looked at me, his expression shattered. "Why didn't you leave?" "Because I made a promise too," I said softly. "To love you, in memory or in forgetting." He broke down then, leaning into me, his tears soaking my shoulder. I held him like I used to, my heart breaking and healing all at once. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "You do," I said. "You always did." When the storm quieted and the world was still again, Daniel fell asleep. I stayed awake beside him, brushing his hair back from his forehead, whispering the same words I used to say every night. "You'll come back to me," I murmured, "even if it takes a lifetime." Outside, the moon slipped through the clouds, and for a brief, fleeting second, I could almost believe that love really was stronger than forgetting. It had been 2 weeks since that night when Daniel broke down in my arms. Since then, the silence between us had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was alive, trembling with everything he was starting to remember. Some mornings, he would wake up and whisper my name like it was fragile glass. Some nights I caught him standing by the window, staring into the dark, lost between what he knew and what he had forgotten. I learned not to rush him. Memories are like wild birds. They come back only when they're ready. That morning, he was quiet again, sitting at the kitchen table with an old photo album I had left open the night before. His fingers traced the edges of each picture like he was reading Braille. "Was this our housewarming?" he asked softly, pointing at a photo where he stood behind me, arms around my shoulders, flour all over his shirt. "Yes." I smiled faintly. "You tried to bake a cake. I burned it?" He guessed. "You burned the kitchen." He laughed, the sound light and real. "I remember this," he said suddenly. "You were wearing a red dress." My heart froze. "Yes," I whispered. "You said I looked like sunset." He nodded slowly, eyes misty. "I didn't forget everything, did I?" "No," I said, voice trembling. "Some things never really leave." Later that day, while I was cleaning the attic, I found a box I hadn't opened in years, the one marked Daniel's things. Dust clung to its edges, but inside it lay a dozen fragments of our past. His old watch, postcards from trips we never took, and one sealed envelope with his handwriting on it. The ink had faded, but the words on the front were still legible. "For Anna, in case I forget." My breath caught. My fingers trembled as I turned the envelope over. It wasn't dated. It must have been written after the accident. Maybe during one of those lucid moments when he knew memory was slipping away. I didn't open it right away. I just held it, feeling its weight. That night, when the rain returned, I brought the letter downstairs. Daniel was sitting by the window, watching the lightning flicker in the distance. "You wrote this," I said softly, holding it out to him. He frowned, taking it carefully. "I did?" "You wrote it after the accident, before your memory faded completely." He stared at the envelope, his thumb brushing over his name. Do you know what's inside? No, I never read it. Why not? Because I was waiting for you to be ready. He looked at me then, eyes glistening. And you think I'm ready now? I think you deserve to know what your heart tried to remember, I whispered. He tore the envelope open slowly, the paper fragile and yellowed. His eyes scanned the first few lines, and I watched the color drain from his face. He began to read aloud, voice shaking. Anna, if you ever have to show me this, it means I've lost the best parts of me. The parts that loved you, the parts that remembered what home felt like. I'm writing this while I still can, because I know memory fades faster than regret. I don't remember the crash perfectly. I remember anger and rain and headlights that came out of nowhere. I remember you crying and me saying things that broke something between us. If you ever forgive me, even when I can't ask for it, thank you. If I forget you, please don't forget me. Please remind me who I was when I was yours. I love you, even in the dark. Daniel. His voice cracked on the last word. Tears spilled down his cheeks, and the letter slipped from his hands. I knelt beside him, pulling him close, feeling his chest tremble against mine. I was so cruel to you, he whispered. I remember now. That night, you begged me to stop the car. You said you couldn't breathe, and I didn't listen. It doesn't matter anymore, I said, holding him tighter. It matters to me, he said fiercely. You could have died because of me. But I didn't, I said softly. And even if I had, I would have still loved you until the end. He broke down completely then. The kind of crying that comes from deep inside. Years of guilt, pain, love, all bleeding out at once. I held him and whispered the same words I did the day he woke up in the hospital. You came back to me. That's all that matters. For days after that, Daniel seemed quieter, but not lost. He started remembering small things. How I liked my coffee, the sound of my favorite song, the way he used to hum when he was thinking. Once, he even fixed the old clock that had been silent since the accident. When it started ticking again, he smiled and said, Maybe time forgave us too. But there were still gaps, blank spaces he couldn't fill. I never forced him. Love, I'd learned, doesn't rush healing. One evening, we decided to visit the hill where we used to watch the stars. We hadn't been there since before everything changed. The climb was slow, Daniel still a little unsure on the uneven path. But when we reached the top, the wind carried that same scent of pine and rain I'd always loved. He looked around, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I know this place. Yes, I said. You said it was the only place where the world stopped spinning. He chuckled softly. That sounds like something I'd say. We sat down, side by side, watching the horizon fade into gold. After a while, he said, sometimes I wonder if memory is overrated. I turned to him surprised. What do you mean? I may not remember everything about us, but I feel it. Every time I look at you, every time you laugh, something inside me recognizes it. Maybe love isn't something the brain keeps. Maybe it's something the soul does. My eyes filled with tears. You sound like the man I married. He smiled faintly. Then maybe he's finding his way back. That night, after we came home, I stood by the window, staring at the soft drizzle outside. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. You know what's funny? He said. What? When the lights go out now, I'm not afraid anymore. Why not? Because you're always there in the dark, he said softly. Maybe forgetting was just my way of learning how to fall in love with you again. I turned around. tears streaming down my cheeks. He brushed one away with his thumb and smiled the way he used to. Slow, warm, and heartbreakingly familiar. And in that moment, it didn't matter what he remembered or forgot. It only mattered that he was here, and that, for the first time in years, the dark felt like home again. Morning light slid softly through the curtains, touching Daniel's face as he slept beside me. His breathing was slow, peaceful, almost childlike. For the first time in months, there was no restlessness, no nightmares clawing at his sleep. I stayed still, memorizing the quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock he had fixed, the rhythm of his breathing. Each sound felt like proof that healing was real. When he finally stirred, he smiled at me, that sleepy, lopsided grin that used to melt every hard day. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good morning, sunshine," I teased. He stretched and looked around. "You know what I dreamed about?" I shook my head. "You and me," he said softly, "dancing in the living room. That song you love. At last." My throat tightened. That was our wedding song. He blinked, startled. "It was?" "Yes." He stared at the ceiling, the smile fading into wonder. "Then maybe I didn't dream it. Maybe I remembered it." I reached for his hand. Maybe both. We spent the morning cleaning old boxes from the attic. He wanted to see more of our life, as he called it now. Among the boxes were dozens of forgotten keepsakes. Our honeymoon pictures, tickets from concerts, a jar full of tiny notes we once wrote to each other whenever one of us felt low. Daniel picked one note at random and unfolded it carefully. In my handwriting it read, "If the world ever forgets you, I won't." He read it twice, then looked up at me. "You meant this, didn't you?" "I still do." Something flickered in his eyes, something deep and frightened. "Anna," he said slowly, "there's something I've been seeing in flashes, like pieces of a dream." "What kind of flashes?" "Headlights, rain, and then me shouting at you." I froze. The air around us thickened. He swallowed hard. "Was I angry that night, before the accident?" "Yes," I whispered. "We fought." His face crumpled. "About what?" "About me leaving for the weekend to see my sister. You didn't want me to go. We both said things we didn't mean." He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers against his temples. "And then I drove too fast, didn't I?" Tears welled in my eyes. "Yes." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The wind outside brushed against the window, a gentle but painful reminder of everything we'd lost. Daniel finally said, "I think I need to know everything, Anna. All of it. I can't move forward until I see the whole truth." I hesitated. It might hurt. He looked straight into my eyes. "So does not knowing." I nodded slowly, then rose and walked to the bookshelf, to the drawer I'd avoided for years. Inside was the small leather-bound diary Daniel had kept after the accident, the one his doctor encouraged him to write in while his memory flickered in and out. When I handed it to him, he looked at it like it was alive. "I wrote in this?" "Yes," I said softly. every day for almost 6 months. He opened the first page. His handwriting was shaky, uneven, but unmistakably his. He began to read aloud, voice trembling. Day 3. She says her name is Anna. She smiles like the sun, but my heart doesn't recognize her. Still, when she holds my hand, something inside me feels safe. He flipped a few pages. Day 27. Sometimes when she leaves the room, I forget she was even here. But when she comes back, I feel peace again. Maybe love is the thing that fills the space where memory should be. My eyes stung. He kept reading in silence, fingers brushing the edge of every page as if each word was a heartbeat. Then he turned to the final entry. The date was 3 days before the letter I'd found in the attic. Day 179. The doctor says my memories might fade completely soon. I'm scared, but not for me. For her. She loves me like I'm still him. But what if he never comes back? If this is my last clear thought, I hope she knows that somewhere inside me, I'm still hers. Always will be. His voice cracked on the last word. The diary slipped from his hands, landing softly on the carpet. I knelt beside him. You wrote that on a good day, I whispered. You were fighting to remember. And you did, Daniel. You found your way back. He shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. How did you forgive me? I could have killed us both that night. I destroyed so much. I took his face in my hands. Because love doesn't count mistakes. It just waits until we find our way home. He pulled me close and held me like he hadn't in years. Tight, desperate, real. Outside, thunder rolled again, echoing that night long ago. But this time it didn't sound threatening. It sounded cleansing. When he finally let go, he looked around the room as if seeing it new. You kept everything, he murmured. Even my broken watch. I kept what mattered, I said. He smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time I give something back. Before I could ask, he walked to the closet and pulled out an old box, one I hadn't seen in forever. Inside were his sketches. Daniel had been an artist before the accident, though he hadn't picked up a pencil in years. He sat at the table, opened his worn sketchbook, and began to draw. His hand trembled at first, but soon the lines began to flow, slow and sure, like memory returning through art. After an hour, he turned the sketch pad toward me. It was us, sitting on the couch, lights off, the faint glow of candles between us. The title, written in uneven letters. When the lights went out, I covered my mouth, tears spilling. You remembered. He smiled. I didn't just remember. I understood. We sat there for a long while, the silence heavy but sacred, filled with the hum of the rain against the windows. The sketch lay between us, still wet with graphite dust, and I couldn't stop staring at it. It was perfect, flawed in the same way life was, beautiful because of it. Daniel leaned back, exhausted but calm. His fingers were smudged with charcoal, and his eyes had that familiar depth again, the one I used to fall into so easily. Anna, he said quietly. Can I tell you something strange? I nodded. When I was drawing, I saw it. The crash. Not in fragments, not in flashes. The whole thing. My stomach twisted. Are you sure you want to talk about it? Yes, he whispered. I need to. He took a shaky breath. We were arguing. I don't even remember why it mattered so much. You were crying, begging me to pull over. Then the headlights came from nowhere, a truck swerving in the rain. I tried to stop, but I was too late. I heard you scream my name, and then everything went black. I reached for his hand. It was cold, trembling. When I woke up, he continued, I couldn't remember anything, not even your face. But I remember the feeling, this heavy, unbearable love that didn't know who to belong to. He looked up at me, eyes shimmering. And then I saw you in the hospital. You smiled like I was the same man, even though I wasn't. I think that's what brought me back. I pressed my forehead against his, both of us shaking. You came back because we were never truly apart, I whispered. For a moment, the only sound was our breathing. Uneven, tangled, real. He exhaled slowly. I think I finally understand now. The night the lights went out wasn't the end of us. It was the start of a new promise. What promise? I asked softly. He smiled faintly. That if memory ever failed again, love would remember for me. Tears blurred my vision. Then promise me one more thing. Anything. If the lights go out again, you'll find me. He touched my face, thumb brushing my cheek. Always. Outside, thunder cracked, but instead of fear, it felt like release. The storm that once tore our lives apart now sounded like applause from heaven itself. Daniel leaned in and kissed me, slow, trembling, full of every forgotten moment returning at once. The kiss wasn't just love. It was recognition, forgiveness, homecoming. When he pulled back, the power flickered again, the lamps dimmed, and for a heartbeat, the room fell into complete darkness. This time, neither of us moved. We just sat there, hands intertwined, listening to the rain. In that darkness, we didn't need memory. We didn't need light. We had everything that ever mattered. The sound of each other's breath, the warmth of skin against skin, the quiet proof that love survives even when the mind doesn't. And for the first time since the accident, I wasn't afraid of losing him again. Because even if the lights went out forever, I knew now, love doesn't fade. It just changes form. It's strange how peace doesn't come all at once. It arrives quietly, like morning light slipping through curtains. Months passed after that night when the lights went out for the last time, and the world slowly rebuilt itself around us. The storm had ended, but its echo lingered, a gentle reminder of what we'd survived. Daniel and I settled into a rhythm that was different, softer. Some days were perfect. He remembered everything, from the smell of my coffee to the words of our favorite song. Other days, the fog returned, and he'd look at me with that lost, questioning gaze. But this time, I didn't fear it. We had learned how to find each other in the dark. He started painting again. The house filled with canvases. Fields at sunset, rain-soaked streets, a pair of silhouettes holding hands beneath a single umbrella. I could see his heart in every brushstroke. One day, he painted something new. A dimly lit living room with two figures sitting together, candles flickering between them. He titled it, simply, Home. We decided to move to the countryside, away from the noise of the city that still carried too many ghosts. Our new house stood by a lake, surrounded by pine trees that whispered in the wind. The first evening there, Daniel said, "You know, I don't remember building this life with you, but I feel like I've been here all along." I smiled, touching his hand. "Maybe that's what love does. It makes every place feel familiar." He nodded. "Even after everything, I wouldn't change a single thing." I laughed softly. "Not even the crash?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "If that hadn't happened, I might have never learned how deep love can go. Sometimes we need the dark to see how bright the light really is." I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath. The sky outside turned golden, the water reflecting 1,000 tiny suns. For the first time in years, I felt no ache, no weight, only quiet gratitude. At night, as we sat by the window, the power flickered once more. Daniel chuckled. "Seems the lights have a habit of testing us." I reached for his hand. "Let them. We've passed the test before." He smiled and squeezed my fingers. "You know something, Anna? I think the lights go out just to remind us that love doesn't need them." I didn't answer. I just leaned closer, and together we watched the darkness fall, knowing it could no longer take anything from us. Years drifted by like quiet waves. The lake became our calendar. Spring blossoms, summer sunsets, autumn fog, winter frost. Each season carried a memory, a heartbeat. Life had slowed down, but in that stillness, I found something I'd been searching for all along. Meaning. Daniel's memory never fully returned, but his love never left. It existed beyond recollection, as though his heart had stored everything his mind forgot. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me with that same curious smile, asking softly, "Did we ever dance in the rain?" And I'd laugh, reminding him of that summer storm when he twirled me barefoot in the garden while thunder rolled above. He'd smile. "Then I must have loved you even then." There was something pure about the way he loved me now. Simple, unfiltered, unburdened by the past. I stopped wishing for what we'd lost and started cherishing what we had. As years turned into decades, his health began to waver. The brushes stayed unused on the shelf, and the house grew quieter. But every evening he insisted we light a candle by the window. "In case the lights go out again," he'd say with a wink. One autumn night, the storm returned. Gentle rain tapping on the windows, wind whispering through the trees. Daniel lay resting, his breathing shallow but peaceful. I held his hand, tracing the veins that had once held so much strength. He opened his eyes slowly and looked at me. "Anna," he whispered, "do you remember the night I forgot everything?" My heart tightened. "I do." His lips curved into the faintest smile. I remember now." A tear slipped down my cheek. "What do you remember?" He exhaled, eyes glimmering with something between memory and dream. "Your voice. The sound of you calling my name when the lights went out. That's what brought me back." I couldn't speak. My heart broke and healed all at once. He squeezed my hand gently. "Promise me one thing," he said, his voice barely audible. "When I'm gone, don't live in the dark. Keep the light on for both of us." "I promise," I whispered. That night, he drifted to sleep, and for the first time, I didn't wake to his breathing beside me. The candle by the window burned low, flickering once before going out. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, feeling the warmth fade, holding his hand until it grew still. Morning came quietly. The storm had passed. The lake was calm again, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. I opened the curtains and let the light flood in. It's been 12 years since that night. Sometimes I still wake up reaching for him, expecting to find his hand waiting for mine. But the house only answers with silence. And yet, that silence has changed. It's softer now. Like an old friend who knows your pain and sits quietly beside you. I never moved away. The lake still shimmers outside the same window, and Daniel's paintings still hang on the walls. Every brushstroke, every color feels like a conversation frozen in time. Some days I talk to them, to him, as if he might be listening through the layers of paint. The world kept moving. New families bought the neighboring houses. Children played where Daniel once painted, and every evening the sun still sank behind the same hills. Life didn't stop. It just learned how to carry loss differently. I started painting again. At first it was just a way to fill the hours. A few strokes here and there, clumsy attempts at remembering how. But soon it became more. I painted what I missed, what I felt, what I couldn't say. My first finished piece was titled, When the Lights Went Out. It wasn't a painting of darkness. It was of a candle burning in front of a window, rain falling softly outside, and two shadows holding hands. The gallery owner who saw it said it felt like hope learning to breathe again. Maybe that's what love really is. Not the fireworks, not the big moments, but the quiet endurance that keeps glowing even when everything else fades. Every year, on the anniversary of his passing, I walk to the lake at dusk. I bring one candle, light it, and set it adrift on the water. It floats gently, its reflection trembling with the ripples, until it disappears into the horizon. People sometimes ask why I never remarried. I just smile and say, because I already found home once. And when the nights feel too long, when memories start to ache, I whisper his words back into the dark. Don't live in the dark. Keep the light on. Then I strike a match, light a candle, and watch as its flame dances to life. In that small circle of warmth, I still see him. The man who once forgot everything, yet somehow remembered love. Because love, I've learned, doesn't vanish when the lights go out. It just finds another way to shine.